Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Karen Weaver. My guest today is Thomas Ehrlich, President Emeritus of Indiana University. Tom is also the former provost at the University of Pennsylvania and the former dean of the Stanford Law School. He is the author, co-author, or editor of at least 14 nonfiction books. His 15th book, a fictional account of a president navigating the search process of hiring a high-profile football coach, is what brings us to this conversation today. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks. I'm delighted to be here, Karen.
The Search is your first novel. In reading it, some of the scenarios take me back to my days on search committees and navigating campus politics. Walk the listeners through why hiring a football coach became the topic of this book.
Well, there's three reasons I decided to write a novel. The first was COVID hit. I no longer could go into libraries and do research for another book, but I thought it would be fun to try to write a novel. So with some help from creative writing class that I took, I write, as you know, about what you know, and I knew, having been a university president, it would be fun to try it. At the same time, I was worried then, and I'm frankly much more worried now about what's going on in big-time intercollegiate athletics. And I thought I could build the novel around what had happened at Nebraska State, a fictional university, of course, but it had some echoes to what I dealt with at Indiana University.
I could
the
tell
through
that.
line of the search, but also try to pick up the reality that a university president has to deal with a dozen different constituencies: faculty, staff, students, alumni, media, and wrestling with all those is the challenge. But also, for me at least, I love the job. I love being at Indiana University, and it was fun to do, and it was fun to write this novel.
That's great. Give our readers a synopsis of the book. The launch was sort of startling. You've got a sudden action that requires you to think about this whole process. Walk us through that.
The president of this fictional university, named Rosen, is chosen from his job in the business school where he was dean, and he all of a sudden is facing a lot of challenges that he had never faced before, including the constituencies I just mentioned. One of them is the football coach, the most winning coach in all of Nebraska State history, who at the same time was a misogynist, a bully, a loudmouth, foul-mouthed, poor role model, but an incredible teacher for those players who could survive him. President Rosen got off on the wrong foot with him by criticizing him for something his predecessor had never criticized the coach. Buddy Nolan is the name of the coach. And Buddy, in the first chapter, is outraged when they're playing their arch rival, the University of Nebraska, and runs out on the football field, has a heart attack, and dies. And a number of people, it's clear, blame all this on Rosen because he crossed swords with Nolan, and that infuriated Nolan because nobody had ever talked back to him, at least from university administration. The trustees in this fictional university were 7 of them, and 3 of them were former players belonged to Nolan's teams, and they were clearly furious at Rosen to begin with. As it happens, the trustees have to decide whether or not the fight was so serious with Nolan that Rosen is going to have to leave too. But by a 4-3 vote, essentially, Rosen gets 6 months to hire a new athletic director and football coach. Nolan was both, which is a terrible thing to do. I took that from Michigan State, where the trustees insisted that the football coach, at his demand, become athletic director, and as a result, the president resigned. So that's one of a dozen or so pieces that actually bear some reality. Not all of it, the novel does. So the president appoints one of his closest and senior advisors, who is the athletic contact from the faculty to the athletic program, as chair of the search. It starts, but then the head of the search gets lured away for a very good job at another university. And Rosen, the president, feels he has to take over the search. Meanwhile, a variety of things are happening in the campus that illustrate the kinds of challenges the university faces. There's a student suicide. There's a faculty member who plagiarized, and other issues. Some are wholly fictitious. It happens that the campus in Nebraska State is on what was Indian, Native American, that is Indian territory, and there's a huge uprising. Rosen also has to deal with a series of donors because he has a big capital campaign. But the search is the through line, and it goes back and forth, near misses and so forth, until finally there's a resolution, which I won't tell you.
That's okay. That's okay. And one of the things that struck me about the book is how important the role your wife plays, the fictitious wife in this thing, of helping the president navigate the politics. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, fortunately, my wife, Ellen, of almost 68 years now, was a true partner in the whole process at Indiana University, and that's reflected, I think, I hope accurately in the novel, because we did so many things together. We traveled all over the state, just as Rosen travels all over Nebraska. My wife Ellen, was first chair of the local United Way, and then she was chair of the state United Way. Then she was on the board of the National United Way. And she was much involved in the community and strengthening the community, much involved in our activities. And of course, we entertained constantly for all the time we were there. In Indiana, we had 2 beautiful houses to do that. And Rosen, my fictitious one, does too, with his wife, who's an artist. My wife is not an artist, but there were some differences there. And yes, she had a really equal role in helping to lead the university. And I was so fortunate to be able to do that. And she feels the same way. We had a wonderful time at the University of Pennsylvania and at Stanford before that, but we didn't have that experience of working together, and it was a joy.
That's great. That's awesome. I don't want to give too much of the plot away. I'm going to encourage people to buy the book, which I have right here. It's really a great read. But what kinds of takeaways would you want soon-to-be presidents or folks who want to become presidents to know about searching for a high-profile position like this?
Well, coaches are in a unique position, I think. So I don't want to compare those to deans or anybody else, but coaches put their lives, their professional lives, in the hands of adolescents in colleges and universities. And winning isn't just important, it's everything. Not winning every game and so forth, but it is, coaches get fired if they're not successful. And this is not the environment where, everybody's above average, as one of our casters used to say. Uh, some teams have to lose more than they win, and their coaches get fired. So there's a lot of tension, a lot of pressure on them. And I don't want to minimize that. Fortunately, in Indiana, the football coach there was a close friend of mine, and we worked well together, and he really did a terrific job. And we went to a number of bowl games, and I loved it. There's a festival spirit. That's why I say in the novel that I have a love-hate relationship with football, because on the one hand, I do watch it and I really enjoy watching it. On the other hand, it destroys players' minds and their bodies.
Yeah.
And that's a bad thing.
It truly is.
That said,
Yeah.
The athletic director has a primary responsibility for hiring a coach. And I wanted Rosen in this novel to have responsibility because I thought it should show what a president could do. But I've not known a situation where that was ever true. And in reality, the athletic director would have done that. But it's such a high profile position, at least at Indiana State, and hiring the basketball coach or the football coach at Indiana or any other University of Pennsylvania, it's a big deal. Actually, much more in what was then the Big Ten, now the Big 18, to my sorrow. But than it is in the Ivy League. The Ivy League, in my view, handles this part much better.
Well, let's talk about that. You worked at 3 high-profile institutions, different in their own ways, but still contributors over the last century to the growth of college athletics. From University of Pennsylvania's early history as a leader in college football, which many people don't realize up and through 1950, to Stanford's incredible record with developing Olympic athletes, to Indiana's, role in the Big Ten, but then all of a sudden they had this unbelievable year in football this fall. You've got a pretty good handle on what the landscape of athletics has been, and also I'd like to get your thoughts on going forward. So where would you like to start?
Well, I do believe athletics have an important role in higher education, not just because they have a festival dimension to the institution. The institution can come together to cheer for its teams, and that's good. It's not only fun, and the players on the whole love to play, otherwise they wouldn't be playing. And at the same time, until maybe some years ago, student athlete meant that you were primarily a student. You could play the sport, but it was expected that the sport was always subordinate to your role as a student. And the coach with whom I crossed swords in my first year, afterwards we were actually quite friendly, but Bob Knight, who was my first year the most successful basketball coach, and I think he still is the most successful in terms of championships, always said that being a student is more important than being a player. That started to corrode, in my view, at least from my perspective, when I was in the Big Ten, which was Midwestern universities, and a proposal was made to add Penn State. And if you have, or your viewers have been there, Penn State is extremely difficult to get to.
Yes.
So it takes an extra day to get there and an extra day to go back. And the president of the University of Michigan and I both opposed joining Penn State, which is a great university, simply because it took too much time away from academic efforts. We lost. And we lost because the majority wanted the TV revenue from an East Coast university, and they got it. Now, Penn State then was the first. And today it's 18, stretching across the country from UCLA and USC to the Atlantic seaboard. And that means that students, not just in football and basketball, the high profile ones, but in all 30 or whatever number this institution has, both women and men have to travel, spend more time on airplanes than they do in classes. And they have to arrange their classes so they're doing virtually nothing except athletics during the season. And the seasons, some of them are long, and they practice 6 or 7 hours a day. And it has, in my view, changed the whole character of being a, quote, student athlete, quite apart from other things that have happened much more recently that have further corroded, to me, the primacy of academics. Obviously now players can get paid. In lots of ways, I'd say they deserve to get paid because they're university in the high profile sports, football and basketball. And at the same time, they can move from campus to campus. So Indiana has a new great coach. You're absolutely right this year, and it did very well as a result. He brought 31 players. He brought a whole team and a half to Indiana. And similarly, this coming year, he's brought another whole group. And it just happens I know that because I am a huge fan of Indiana. I watch and listen to the sport as a result. But it means those students are going to be there for a year, but during the year, they're also looking, where do I want to be next year? Can I get a better deal there? How much am I going to get paid? And all the major teams have booster clubs, I call them, have different names, but basically put up a lot of money so that they can go buy essentially a player, and that player will play, hoping if it's there are women's sports, basketball particularly, where this is also an issue, but not nearly as much. But they can go where the money calls them, and that's I think deeply erroneous set of steps that have been taken. And of course, they now can get paid also for their picture on an automobile ad or whatever it is. And it has, I think, turned in Division I, the big time area, are players into gladiators who just go where the money is, and they're semi-professional teams. It doesn't mean it's not fun to watch them. It is fun to watch them, no question. But I think it is corrosive, not just for the players and the sports, but also for the whole institution.
Yeah.
We have a grandson at Bates College, which is a wonderful place, and they have a whole different perspective. They play just because they have fun. My grandson's a star golfer, and he plays just because he likes it.
How about that?
Even there are preferences for athletes, no question about it. And Ivy League has preferences. Institutions like Stanford have given athletic scholarships for a long time. So I don't want to say it was pure in any way before, but it has gotten significantly and I think dangerously worse. Part, and I have to say, because of the ineffectiveness of the NCAA, the national organization, basically leaving it to conferences.
Let me ask you a question. Your background is as a legal scholar or legal mind. You think a lot about issues from that perspective. Over the years, the rumblings were there that the NCAA may be in violation of antitrust law. And now it appears that enough attorneys have glommed onto that and said, yeah, we really think that you ought to settle, for example, the House case, because if you go to trial, you could be held responsible for violating antitrust law. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I don't know enough about antitrust in the background to think that of all the issues that I would be worried about that I've just been talking about, that's not, I think, in the top 10. It's
Okay.
not to say it's not going to happen, because when colleges and universities used to get together and talk about scholarships,
Yeah.
there was an antitrust suit against, I can't remember, it was just the Ivies or Ivies plus Stanford, Chicago, and Penn. But yes, it's an issue. And if you ask a group of lawyers, is this a risk? They'll always say yes, and that's because they say no, and then there is one, they're wrong, and they get dinged for being wrong. So,
That's right. That's right.
and yes, law is my background, but I'm very careful when I work with lawyers. And my question always is, how can I do this? Not tell me why I can't.
Ah, that's good.
And
That's good.
yeah, and
That's good.
fortunately, I've been blessed with some very good general counsels who've given good and positive advice.
Well, that's important. Now, when you were working as a member of the Big Ten Presidents, the COPSI, Council of Presidents and Chancellors in the Big Ten, what were some of the biggest issues that you faced during your time regarding athletics? Was it Penn State coming into the conference, or were there other things too?
But that was the biggest one, uh, to me at least,
Yeah.
because not that Penn State was going to change everything, but with Penn State, there was no argument against going anyplace.
Hmm.
Why not take any team uh, that looked as though it could bring in significant TV revenues? And the Big Ten did expand pretty regularly. Now, I left 30 years ago, and it's taken 30 years to be where we are. I realize that. But yes, I would say that was the biggest thing. The fact that university presidents in the Big Ten really got together primarily to talk about athletics was just a reality. Fortunately, we had a co group that also talked seriously about academics and
Mhm.
interactions of academics, uh, not in any way that would, in my view at least, conflict with antitrust laws, but rather to strengthen the academic enterprise at our institutions.
Yeah, I think that Council of Presidents and Chancellors played such an important role and still continues to play such an important role in strengthening the brand of the Big Ten to the point now where the Big Ten and the SEC are really dominating the landscape, and
For
so many,
athletics, yeah.
yeah, so many conference colleges want to be invited into the exclusive club. How much bigger do you think they can get?
If you had told me 10 years ago that the Big Ten was going to be 18, I'd say you need some psychiatric help here. Uh,
And the Pac-12 would disappear almost.
and that's, yeah, I'm teaching now at Stanford, and I love Stanford. It's been very good to me. But Stanford had a chance to stay in the Pac-12, and yes, they might have had to include San Jose State or some of the other Cal States, who often beat them anyway in sports. Uh, but they didn't. They said it was important to go to the East Coast where all the teams are. Uh, and I think that was a profound mistake, leaving Washington State and Oregon State. I also think it was a terrible mistake. The regents of the University of California allowed UCLA to break away from Berkeley.
Yeah.
And that's all about money. There are other issues in the Big Ten when I was there, and there always will be. There are a lot of rules. The NCAA was promulgating, and we had to discuss each one and how they were applied. And too often I saw whenever there was a rule, there would be a new way to get around the rule, so you get another rule and so forth.
Yeah.
But there wasn't the push for money. When I early on in my career, I was approached by the athletic director who said, we really need an inside practice facility for football. And I said in words in effect, gee, I thought football was played outside. And of course, I knew that the reason we did that was not anything other than the fact that Ohio State and Michigan both had indoor practice facilities. And if we didn't have one, we'd lose players. Well, that looks like chicken feed right now compared to the things going on. So, yeah. But it was another kind of dagger in my view.
Yeah. Even within the Big Ten, now we've had some disruption, obviously, with Oregon and Washington, USC and UCLA coming in because they've upset their ranking landscape, if you will, in some sports, which is good for everybody. But when you were there, the traditional powerhouses were Michigan and Ohio State, possibly Michigan State, not always. Illinois, maybe not. But there was a gap between the very top schools and the rest. And as president at Indiana, how did you navigate that gap?
Well, I was lucky because we did, the 7 years I was there, we went to 4 bowl games.
Okay.
Now, this wasn't the Rose Bowl, but we went to other Rose Bowl games, which mean, of course, you have to win at least 6 out of 11 games. And not only say you're above average, but actually show you're above average. And that was good. I think it worked well for the campus. They were pleased. Yes, Ohio State and Michigan were the powerhouses, but it didn't seem to me to detract from the major focus of the institution, which was on preparing our students to do the best they could for themselves and for their country, and to give a sense at the same time that sports was fun and it was enjoyable and everybody could play one. Not all could play on the varsities, but they could all have a time. It wasn't just a question of, or even primarily a question of money. And for most of the players I knew a lot of them, that's why they were there, have a good time. And yes, it did promote teamwork and some other skills. But as you may know, there's a move now to make athletics an academic discipline.
Yes. That's popped up every 5 years or so, yes.
Well, this one is, Nike is behind it. So not just behind it, but is involved with it. And to me, it's another worrisome step down. We're in the cellar now, but we're going to go worse than the cellar downhill as far as having just professional teams.
Yeah.
And of course, you go to other countries and they have professional teams. That's what it is.
That's right. My last question about the Big Ten is this. I'm a sports finance person. I pay attention a lot to budget sizes and where the spending is. And I can't help but notice the gap that's widening between schools like Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota, even Northwestern, as compared to Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, even Oregon. So how do schools in the middle of the pack start to close that gap financially?
Well, doing what they can, but either if they have, as Oregon has Phil Knight, who is Nike and funds a large share of their athletic program. Places like Indiana can get booster clubs, called by different name, but that's what, and certainly they do, and they can try to get bigger. But I don't see anywhere in the immediate future they're going to be able to match what Ohio State or Michigan did, although, of course, neither one of those ended up on top.
Ohio State did win the national championship.
Ohio State did
Yeah, they won the national championship this year. Yeah,
no,
but that's okay.
I meant Michigan. I was thinking. Sorry, Ohio State
Yes.
did end up on the very tippy top.
Yeah.
SEC didn't do so well.
Right.
That's really what I was thinking.
That's right. No, you're right. You're right.
And so Alabama and Georgia are going to have to regroup and get even more, which they will. I don't have any doubt.
Yes. Absolutely.
And it's an arms race.
Well, that's for sure.
I used to have naively think, well, if we went to bowl games, that would be really helpful for our bottom line.
Yeah.
So far as I could tell, we never made money on any of the bowl games we went to.
I don't think people realize that.
Yeah.
You spend as much as you make, if not more. Yeah.
Yes, just bringing the band.
That's right. That's right. And all the senior leaders that have to come, right? Well, Tom, this has been great. Thank you so much for your insight, your perspective on where this is coming from, where it might be going, some of the issues, but also, most importantly, thank you for writing this book. I really enjoyed it. And
my hope is that over time, big-time athletics in college and universities can take lessons from Division II and III, and tamp down this lust for more money. It's hard to resist, I understand, and there's screaming fans demanding you do this or that or the other thing. But in light of the fact that college and universities is the critical time to shape leaders of the future and others, it's so important that athletics have a place, but not the dominant place.
Well, those are great words to end by. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Take good care of yourself, Karen. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Sure.